Usually when I'm looking for what I can potentially make a video on, I start doing research on what some of the biggest topics are in sports business. This usually involves me spending a few hours on the weekend, digging through an infinite amount of different articles to find something that I think would be interesting, engaging, and informative enough for y'all to get me 12 minutes of your day. And over the past few weeks, I've come across just a ton of stories with the exact same headline, some combination of the following. Famous athlete, an executive, launched several $100 million SPAC. I'm trying to think, is this the way the sentence would go? Famous athlete, an executive, launched several $100 million SPAC. Seriously, every single one follows that formula. Check this out. Colin Kaepernick, Phoenix Suns co-owner, launched $250 million SPAC. Theo Epstein, Arctos Partners, filed $275 million SPAC. O'Neal, Disney vets seek $300 million for SPAC. The exact same formula. And this extends even further, including names like Serena Williams, Baron Davis, and Alex Rodriguez, who all have their names tied to these SPACs, and all of them are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So I gotta ask, what the hell is going on? And where is all this money coming from? And what the hell is a SPAC? Well, let's answer that last one first. And I apologize in advance if you know this info already. You can spend that time while I explain this hitting that subscribe button and that like button. Bless me with a thumbs up. Alright, really quickly. SPACs, short for Special Purpose Acquisition Companies, are a secondary route companies can take in order to go public. Filing for an IPO takes time. It's extremely expensive, and during periods like today when we're in a bull market, it may cause companies to leave a significant amount of money on the table. Remember, when a company goes public and raises money at say $100 a pop, if that shoots up to $150 right after the stock goes public, the person who makes the $50 isn't the company, it's the investor. That $50 the firm loses out on is mostly because the underwriters priced their stock incorrectly. In addition to that, it's extremely expensive to market your stock and a very lengthy process. It can take a company anywhere from 6 to 18 months. And if you're a company that needs cash fast, this can be a problem. In comes the SPAC, which aims to solve a lot of these issues by offering companies a workaround around a lot of these barriers. In short, a SPAC does a lot of the hard work initially. It's a company that's single objective is to raise money and merge with another private company, taking them public. SPACs do a lot of the dirty work by finding investors, raising capital, and most importantly, going public. Once that's complete, they're put on a timeline where they're given no more than 2 years to take all the money they've raised and use it to merge with the company. And given the SPAC is already public, the lengthy 6 to 18 month traditional IPO process is now effectively eliminated. In addition to this, going public via SPAC effectively eliminates the risk that the private company would leave any money on the table, seeing that the market valuation is negotiated ahead of time. So that situation from earlier where the stock goes from 100 to 150 right away, that would most likely not happen in this case, or at least it wouldn't be as dramatic. And a lot of investors may actually prefer this route, given that there are a lot of precautions taken in order to eliminate risk for investors as well. Namely that at any point they can ask for their money back prior to the deal being announced. And if the 2 years comes up and the SPAC still hasn't found a company to merge with, investors can get their money back, minus any fees of course. It's always fees. It's always fees. I remember back in my day. Alright, so we covered a SPAC, how it benefits the company, and how it can benefit the investors. What about the people in charge of the SPAC? How do they make money? They have to make money, right? And the answer is absolutely. Quite a bit, actually. The people managing the SPAC, often referred to as the sponsors, get cheap stock when they close an acquisition. This stock, called the promote, can often be pretty big, up to 20% of the new company. This is why near the end of the SPAC's timeline, at the end of that 2 years, they'll often rush to buy anything they can, because 20% of any company is better than nothing. Alright, so then there's the last question. Where do these athletes come in? What role do Shaq and Serena Williams and Colin Kaepernick have in these SPACs? Well, they're there for a few reasons. One is institutional knowledge. Shaq knows a lot about basketball. Serena knows a lot about tennis. Athletes bring a lot of experience to the table, given that they're primarily involved in sports-related SPACs that are looking to acquire companies in the sports industry. And who can speak better to sports than the athletes themselves? The second reason is their contact list. And this piggybacks on the earlier point around institutional knowledge. These athletes know a lot of people. Let's say the SPAC Shaq is involved with, that is a hard sentence. Let's say the SPAC Shaq is involved with would like to buy a basketball team. Well, it just so happens that Shaq played on quite a few himself and likely has many contacts within each of those organizations. That knowledge and set of relationships are key when looking to find opportunities to invest. The third reason, and potentially the biggest, most important reason, is marketing, specifically marketing to investors. When setting up a SPAC, there are generally two main boxes that need to be checked: what industry you want to invest in and how much money you want to raise. The money that's raised, that comes directly from investors, both institutional and retail, people like me and you. Given that the SPACs haven't acquired a company just yet, and therefore can't incentivize me and you by promising future earnings or a new product, one of the most effective ways to get investors to invest in SPACs are by pulling in celebrities and giving them a role within the company. Serena, for example, was given a board seat at her company. Shaq was given the role as a special advisor. In fact, that same SPAC even recruited Martin Luther King III to join as an executive. By pulling in these athletes and celebrities, the goal is to help promote the SPAC and attract investors that otherwise have no association to the company. Take, for example, Mission Advancement Corporation. It's a SPAC that's interested in investing in something sports related and wants to raise $250 million. It doesn't sound that interesting and have no real understanding or idea what sports related is. That could literally mean anything. Why on earth would I give them my money when I could just invest it in something else that I'm familiar with, say Apple stock? But now let's say Mission Advancement Corporation pulls in Colin Kaepernick, which they did, and give him a role as a co-chairman of the SPAC. They agree to work with him to identify a mission that parallels his values, making sure they're investing in something that creates both financial and societal equity. That sounds a whole lot better, and I'm actually getting the opportunity to invest in an athlete that I like and a company with a good mission. That's a whole lot better than just investing in something that's sports related. But alright, we touched on the benefits enough. There's gotta be a downside here, right? There's always a downside. Though to be fair, not all of it has been understood or realized just yet. SPACs have been around for a while, since 1993, but only recently became mainstream. So the scale and massive amounts of money that's on the clock to be spent in the next few years has never reached the levels they're at today. For context, in 2020, the highest number of SPACs in a given year was 66 in 2007, making up 22% of the IPOs that year. And yes, we're talking about that 27, right before the recession 2007. After that, it fell quickly back down to 17 the next year, and never past 60 again until 2020 when all hell broke loose. Alright, look, quick rant, quick break. Can we stop talking about 2020? It's done. It's done. It's behind us. I don't want to hear nothing about 2020 anymore. It's over. Bandadas. Sorry. Where were we? SPACs. Skyrocketing. Yes. Okay. Over the past few years, SPACs have gone crazy. It's jumped from 59 SPAC IPOs in 2019 to 248 in 2020, making up over 50% of all IPOs that year. And this year, at the time of writing, they've already reached 160, making up 78% of all IPOs. And we're not even 2 full months into the year. At this rate, we're on track to surpass all of the previous year's SPAC IPOs combined by August. Now, here's the problem with that. Well, there's 3 big problems. 1, as tiring and as inefficient as the traditional IPO process can be, it does one thing better than anything else. It makes sure that a company is thoroughly vetted before hitting the market. When planning to IPO, there's a real risk that once the underwriters, the firms responsible for helping manage and market the IPO, get their hands on your financials, they'll find that you're not valued at what was initially expected. Or worse, they'll say that you shouldn't even be on the market at all. We saw this with WeWork. They wanted to file a traditional IPO, but as more and more people vetted the company, their valuation kept getting slashed to the point where they ended up dropping the IPO entirely, firing their CEO and restructuring the company to act and run like a proper company. It ended up being their greatest blessing, but had it not gone through that scrutiny and landed on the market, it would have burned investors in the long run. Now, ironically, WeWork is now planning on going public via SPAC, but that may be more a result of PTSD. I don't really blame them there. They kind of went through it once already. And the second problem here is that SPACs, long term, don't actually perform as well as standard IPOs. And this may have a lot to do with the earlier point that a lot of these companies just haven't been vetted. In fact, more often than not, SPACs end up losing money. From 2015 to July 2020, 89 SPACs completed mergers and took a company public. Of those 89 companies, common shares had an average loss of 18.8%. The average traditional IPO during that time, it's gone up 37%. Now, to be fair, there are outliers. For example, people that bought into Social Capital SPAC made 10 times the return when it merged with Virgin Galactic, but those are few and far between. In fact, more often than not, they've lost a lot of money for investors. And that brings us to the last problem with SPACs. Not the only other problem. There are tons, just the last one that we're going to cover here. And that problem is the conflict of interest. To put it simply, the people running a SPAC don't always have the interests of all the other stakeholders in mind. And this is a result of the 24-month restriction that they have to find an investment. The closer they get to that end date, naturally, the less picky they become and more willing to overlook risky aspects of a company and not perform the due diligence that a company would otherwise have to go through in a traditional IPO. And even if the stock flops, they still have 20% of the company they otherwise wouldn't have. And they can sell out of that stock at a profit, even if it goes down for everyone else, given how little they had to pay as a result of the sponsor's discount. And this is compounded by the large number of SPACs that are on the market today. There are nearly 50 SPACs focused on sports alone. That's more than the total number of SPACs most every other year. So you have a ton of SPACs with a ton of money, over 16 billion in capital, with a restricted amount of time, all competing in the same industry, fighting over the same few opportunities available in sports. Mind you, a lot of them are focused on team ownership, something that rarely ever becomes an opportunity. On the best day, there are never more than 1 or 2 teams available at any of the major leagues. Now push this same model across all of the market. You have a lot of people with a lot of money, where there is very little supply, forcing them to invest in companies that aren't good enough to be receiving this money, where we're inflating the value of assets, not because they've increased in value, but because the amount of supply is just so much lower than the demand. Sounds like a perfect recipe for a bubble, or God forbid, a recession. So let's summarize. Though they present a lot of opportunity and simplify the IPO process, SPACs also have a lot of risk. They don't get vetted as thoroughly as they should. They're being pushed to go public by individuals that may not even be interested in the well-being of the company, and they more often than not bring pretty significant negative returns to investors. Look, I'm gonna just keep it honest with y'all. This isn't advice. This is more a cautionary note. It's easy to get caught up in the hype. Bitcoin is through the roof, GameStop went to the moon, and people made millions. But there are also a lot of people that get pulled into the hype and end up being left holding the bag. Don't treat this any differently. The people at the top do not have the same incentives you and I have. Their shares can lose money and they'll still be fine. You and I don't have that luxury. As awesome as it is to be able to invest in an athlete like Serena Williams, the reality is that the risk is no less than before she was on board. I'm not here to tell you how you should or could spend your money. I do not offer investment advice. I've also had my fair share of L's. I've gotten burned quite a few times. All I'm asking is that you proceed with caution and that you like this video and subscribe to the channel and hit me with this thumbs up. Alright y'all, thank y'all so much for making it through another one of these videos. If you're new here and you liked it, please hit that subscribe button. We're just starting out here and I'm doing what I can to help make this grow, and any support that we can get is greatly appreciated, and I can't thank each and every one of you enough. And again, to all of you new or old to this channel, I just want to say thank you. Seriously, even though I know it's just a handful of you, it really means the world to me that y'all took this time to watch anything that I make. And I know I still got a lot of improvement to do. I know these videos are still a little rough, but I promise, y'all keep supporting me. I'll keep putting the work in. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your day. Love y'all. Peace. Shaq's back, Shaq's back, Shaq. Shaq's back, Shaq's back, Shaq's back, Shaq's back, Shaq's back. Oh, jeez. Shaq's back, Shaq's back, Shaq's back, Shaq's back, Shaq's back. Hey, watch these videos. These videos right here, watch them. I don't know which ones are gonna pop up, but is my fingers too high? Here we go. Watch these videos right here. Shaq's back, 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 Shaq's back.